And we actually want to talk about an interesting topic, an important topic, business to consumer. And you have listened today to a lot of startups who have a B2B business model, but these companies are quite special because they have a business to consumer model. And I have prepared a couple of questions, but we are also improvising, okay? And we start, ladies first, with the first question to Annemarie. And you are actually, your role at Sonnen is very much understanding customers. Tell us about your role and why it is so important for Sonnen, for the success of Sonnen, and tell us about who are actually your customers. How well do you know them?
So, how long have you got? Because this is a topic I can talk a lot about. Don't worry, guys. I'll let you also speak. No. A logical question. Why are our customers so important? Well, if we go back to what we want to achieve we want to bring our products to our customers. We want to have the right products, and we want to listen to our customers. So logically speaking, we need to understand who they are. And if you look how Sonnen has developed, we've started in 2010, and where we are now, we've made a tremendous development. And that also means that our customers have changed. So what do? We do a lot of in-depth interviews. We do a lot of analysis. And for example, quite recently, we have now again defined 5 new customer groups. And these are, I think, the typical ones that I think I'll later see all the gentlemen nod their heads. You have the environmentalist, you have the techie, you have the one who's really focused on autonomy, you have the guy who's the economist, and then there's also this other group. And what we do all the time is look at how does our messaging work with our customer group. And tingle, and experiment fast and test. And we've got a lot of insights and we're using them all the time. Mm.
Philipp, what made you adopt a business to consumer model? And what enabled you to execute it? Because it's an interesting position to have in the market. You have the direct customer relationship, but it's also a position where you need a marketing budget in order to make it happen. And what was your original strategy, and how did you maybe even evolve it over time?
Well, I think if you look at what we do from a customer point of view and start thinking customer first, then in 2012-13, it was pretty clear that the customer experience was not good enough. And if you're really serious about the customer journey and look at the incumbents in the market, whether they are small installation companies or large utility companies, well, none of them are really good in providing a good customer experience. So I guess the rest is pretty simple. Let's say intellectually, then it's a lot of hard work, right? So then you go into that level of detail at every single step of the customer journey, what needs to happen at which point in time, and especially if you have this deep vertical integration, it's just a lot of details you need to be good at. I don't think you need a lot of marketing budget. Leopold and I, we talked about it earlier today. Our companies now are reaching a maturity where you probably consider investing some budget into your brand. I think to this level we all got with good performance marketing, so very, very, let's say, laser sharp marketing, very transaction oriented marketing, and like I presented this morning, or like I mentioned this morning, our marketing cost as a share of revenue is 1/3 of what it was 2 years ago. So we're actually decreasing our marketing while growing 30-50%. So.
I think that's very true what you say. Just to add to that, also what Annemarie said, is that it's very important to understand the concept of crossing the chasm, that you need to execute the technology adoption lifecycle. What does that mean? Essentially, it's about going to the tinkerers first, the innovators then the early adopters, which are like 15% of the society, so roughly per country, and really catering to those needs and really speaking to these people first. And not trying to get to the mass market in the very beginning, because then you will spread your marketing money and it's going to be in vain, pretty much.
And just quickly to add, there is something like, let's say, category learning curve. So being the pioneers in what we do, we of course had to pay with some of the very expensive venture capital for the learning curve of the entire category in batteries and in smart thermostats, in, let's say, digitized customer journey. And when I go back 3-4 years, and if I would listen in again to our telesales agents, they would spend a lot of time explaining to our customers that we are actually a real company, not a platform, and that that is actually going to be real people coming to your place. Today, there's a bit of a category knowledge, so we have to spend less time on that, for instance.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. We just joked around saying that the smart home has been around for maybe since the 60s. I don't know if you know the movie The Party with Peter Wallace, where this guy comes into a Hollywood home and he finds this panel with the switches and lights on the side, and he's doing these switches, and then weird things happen in the house. The smart home has been around since then. And in the last, say, 5 years, the fog has really cleared. And companies have evolved that have a clear value proposition, clear benefits, clear features with a nice price point. Some companies have gone away, and this helps. Yeah.
And Leo, you are defending your brand quite a bit, because if you do a deal with a utility, it will always be Tado branded, right? You don't have any white label version of your product, right?
Yeah, I mean, following the strategy.
Is this a challenge? Because many utilities like to have white label suppliers and put their brand first, but in your case, your brand is already very strong.
Yeah, well, I think what you say is true. This is that Tado has a perception in the European market already, and that utilities are seeing the benefits of also working with a brand like Tado, which was different 3 years ago. And it's always a tough discussion. That's true. I mean, obviously there's different interests in a discussion like that, but so far we've always arrived to an agreement, and I think it's about combining the two worlds with reach and then having a nice customer experience and just making a nice offering in the end.
Philipp, do you also make deals with big channel partners so far?
Well, we have all kinds of partnerships, but typically we would get leads from our partners, and then it would be all our customer journey. We have leads with OEMs, partnerships with OEMs, for instance. We did put a lot of time, actually, in 2014, 2015, in a white label approach powered by Thermondo. So also we always negotiated that we had to be visible in every partnership. And it just didn't create the volumes that we wanted, and so we decided to put our energy and time into other channels.
Felix, why did you adopt a B2C strategy?
I think for us it was a pretty simple decision. I mean, you guys have touched on it in what you said, and I think one of the key things in all this energy transition that's happening right now, that we see a lack of it happening with the consumers at home. So for us, it was both a policy idea that we said, look, energy transition needs to be done by the individuals, and it's way too complicated for them. So we really wanted to do that. I think that's the number one thing why we started doing a B2C product. And the second one is that I believe, especially in this sort of complex new technology sphere, it really disciplines you to have to be able to tell a story to a consumer, to have to be able to actually make your product being understood by everyone and not just the early adopters. Obviously, we started with that as well. When we first started marketing our product about 2 years ago, we started going to the people who were sort of the nerds, early adopters. It was a very different product then. They wanted to play around with features and see every detail. And then we very quickly realized if we keep doing this for too long, we spend a lot of time and effort catering to people who are only maybe 2% of the addressable market. And so then we stepped up and said, look, we try to make it simple. We try to find things that really work for everyone and that give people a simple introduction to energy transition. And why is all that? Because I believe that just makes you better. So if from the very beginning, so maybe a little bit different than the evolutionary approach that you've just mentioned, I think when you focus at the very beginning of sort of making a product accessible and easily understandable for just everyone, I know it's difficult, then you can do that. And I agree with you, we don't have to spend so much on marketing if you just do the razor-sharp performance marketing, metric-driven marketing is what we call it, where we just go to very individual areas, look at how it works there, spend a lot of money on a very limited amount of possible clients, and then we see how it works, and then we can replicate it. So I think, especially with digitalization coming to where it is right now, and the tools that we have, that even small, young companies like ours, we're much younger than all the big guys in the room here, have an ability to just really establish a consumer product right now.
I think you really need to make a choice. And I think that's one of the most important things that we're doing is make a choice. Who are you going after? With which tactics are you going after them? I mean, we've made a very conscious choice, for example, to only work with our own leads because we see the return on investment is so much better. And yes, it was a change, but this is the best decisions we've made. And you have to be very critical and also say, okay, this didn't work. And I think this is, something that all of you will agree to. We're trying and then doing it. And if it doesn't work, fail fast, move on.
Leo, I want to ask you, you are the Chief Marketing Officer of Tado, and you have been basically from the beginning. Give us a little insight into your marketing department, on the one hand. Right. Who is working there, what they are doing. Give us a little bit insight into your marketing activities, how you acquire customer, what you have learned, what has been working for you, and what hasn't worked for you so far.
I mean, first of all, like Philipp said in the beginning, we followed a very performance-driven approach from the get-go. So we really try to scale with the existing demand in Google search advertising, etc., and really, using those data points to acquire the first customers and be in close contact with them, doing lots of interviews to get them to know better. We then, at some point, realized, hey, the market isn't growing as fast as we had hoped. Back in 2012, the search volume for smart thermostat was pretty much limited. That's a different game right now. So what do? You then extend into the more awareness-driven marketing, which doesn't mean I'm buying a huge billboard campaign in the subway. It means just using the measures that are a little bit further up in the funnel. So what we do, for example, is content marketing. So we really try to tell stories that are not about selling the product in the first instance, but that communicate the values of our brand, and then in a second step say, hey, by the way, we have a nice product. Why don't you try it out? So we're currently at an interesting stage in our company where we say we extend this performance mindset marketing team into a more channel agnostic awareness team that basically covers our 3 sales channels, which is direct sales, retail, and solution sales, where we work with utilities and telcos mainly. So we have about 20 people in the marketing team at the moment. And we've just hired a great head of marketing. She has great experience from the FMCG sector, and she will start in a couple of weeks from now and really drive this awareness part of the funnel.
And I know Leo actually still lives in Berlin and has been with Groupon. That's where you got your marketing education, right? I think that's also what Berlin is very good at. As consumer-facing startups out of Berlin, or with a marketing head, let's say, out of Berlin, we don't look at ourselves as being so good at this. But whenever we talk to other people from other cities, or let's say large companies, and we tell them how we do it, how we, for instance, do lead scoring, on which level of detail we are operating on really scoring attributes of leads with then distinct journeys following that scoring, then that typically blows people away. And I think that's just one strong feat of the city. You have a lot of good performance marketeers, a lot of analytical people that you find and can hire in Berlin.
But you also have the technology, because this is, we're using a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning because we see great leaps can be made there. And I think this is also, and we know it with Zalando, this is where it's going. So really being on top of the newest trends and technology and trying them out. And we've seen amazing results with those.
Philipp, can you explain the concept of lead scoring a little bit more? Because I understand it's quite important for you. What are you actually doing and how do you score leads? And what is then happening?
See, I kicked out that slide last night at 12 o'clock, but basically picture our funnel. So we have leads coming from all kinds of sources. On a category level, it's probably like 10 different sources. So there can be offline sources. Most of them are online sources. The biggest bucket of that is our own website. And then from that own website, you have various landing pages, obviously. So every lead comes typically with, depending on the source, 10 to 15 attributes. And we, at all times, have an A/B test running. So there is one large group, which then is tested, and there's always a smaller group with the same attributes. And then we have always alternative journeys on that second group. The big group is our commercially important one, obviously. And since we have a high volume of leads, those tests can actually quite rapid. And it's a constant testing. And to give you an example, whether a lead ends up in outside sales, which is one of our sales channels, or telesales is a matter of the attributes. Whether a lead ends up in none of these two and is directly only targeted or communicated to via direct emailing is a matter of the attributes. And then there's a certain lead nurturing. So when we see a certain activity on that lead, being an opening of an email, for instance, or an activation in an email, then that it could mean that it's back to, let's say, lead warming or directly into outside sales, and we make an appointment with that customer. So it's basically scoring the attributes, always testing with alternative groups the behavior of whether our score is right, and then a whole bunch of alternative activity journeys for the respective scores.
I think it's important to know that acquiring customers is a pre-sales journey, right? And every step is so important. You need to be super meticulous in every step. The customer acquisition cost can double if you get it wrong in one step, right? And they can be cut in half if you get it right everywhere. So it's really, really about being like a day trader, being super data-driven, and that's a bit of contrast, but you got to be super creative as well, because probably in the beginning when you scale a startup, you don't have the money to just buy reach. Reach needs to be in the concept, right? So it needs to be creative and funny, for example, or very informative, entertaining. And that's why, well, we all know in B2C, emotions play a huge part. So combining that with then a meticulous execution of stage-based optimization, I think is what needs to happen.
Just to add to that, on the sort of growing side on a company, it's all the things that you described right now. They're possible to do with a small team of 30, 40 people like we have. I remember 5 years ago when I ran business and tried to scale them up, I needed to have a much bigger department. I needed much more resources to actually get those kind of insights. So the tools, the technology, and all these things have come so far that I think with a meticulous execution, which is the conditio sine qua non for any of that, you can really get to these things rather quickly, and even at a smaller scale already.
You could just hear that he's actually has a PhD, right?
Now I want to ask you, it's more a question for the three big startups, but first of all, you are really big companies now, right? You have raised tons of money, 50 million, almost
52,
and 96, I think, was the latest number, and I think the new round will be quite big too, so you go way beyond 100, so it's big amounts of money, right? Do you need this much venture capital because you are business to consumer? And the second question, is it nowadays easy to find investors, or is it difficult to find investors who are supporting a business-to-consumer model? And the third question, which is probably the most interesting one, is it actually the reason for your success that you have a business-to-consumer model? Because you can take all the decisions on your own, what you want to do, what you want to offer. You can be really, really fast. You can be really, really innovative, right?
Want to have a go?
So my memory is not so good. Let me answer the last question first. Yes, I think that was a very good decision that we took. We never really, even when we had these endeavors into B2B2C, so into, let's say, the utility space, it was always clear that 90% of our effort was on B2C, right? And it was always clear to us that we're going to build a brand and that we were proud of our processes, we were proud of our customer experience and our customer journey, and we were always felt very strong about that this is our core competence and that this is going to be very difficult to copy and that we are not giving this away under a different brand. So, so I think I would always do that again, right?
So it is a reason for your success, the B2C strategy?
I think so. I don't think we could have scaled it. No, I mean, no doubt, actually. We could have scaled at this speed if we had been dependent on somebody else. No way.
And combined to that was the question, do the investors easily support a B2C strategy, which is a little bit more capital intensive rather than capital efficient?
Well, you know our shareholder body, and we have a couple of digital investors, that typically would invest in digital companies. And when they felt that they dared to go into what we do, that in the beginning they didn't like the touch, right? And it's obviously not as lean as an all digital model. But what they very much understand is how big the market is, and they very much understand unit economics, and they very much understand customer acquisition. So all these things are very close to their heart, and they are very comparable to other companies they invest in. So if you show traction on those KPIs, then any large digital VC, and that's where a lot of the capital is, obviously, is happy to invest.
Yeah, I think it's important to, before we speak about customer acquisition costs, really understand what the customer lifetime value is, right? Because that drives on how much you are willing to invest in a new customer. And I think it's really about bold investing in marketing. It's not so much about squeezing. I mean, obviously, it has to fit the current financing strategy, etc. But in the end, if you've got the customer lifetime value figured out, it's a lot easier to invest in marketing.
But that takes time.
Yeah, and that's right. Yeah, you need data points for that. That's true. But then you have a good story to bring to an investor, because in the end, that's economics, and that's just scale.
To prove what we're doing, for example, we've also given points to our customer, because it's very important. It's cool that we do lead scoring, but you also need to do customer scoring, because some customers are just a time waster. And so we've made a very conscious choice. No, but it is true, because some customers will never buy. And making a conscious choice and saying, you know what, based on the scoring, we're not going to go after them, and explaining that to your investors and showing how you invest the money, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we're in a very fortunate position. We can have a lot of data touch points, and we can use them properly.
For instance, we measure the NPS at 5 stages in our customer journey. So post-sales, post-installation, post-service incident, post-customer care call, and at the very end, like 3 months later. And so we very much believe in that. And the beauty of the NPS is that you also have this qualitative field, right? So you get the score, and you have the comments. And if you make that visible within the office and make it visible and trace it down to, for instance, we can trace it down to the installation team, we can trace it down to the customer care agent, and obviously you can use that to manage performance and also simply to improve and use that as a feedback channel. You also get very far, and we really believe in that. You might not, but we feel it really, when we started introducing it like in December and really starting to really follow it almost religiously. Well, it's a bit too large, that word, but with a lot of attention, let's say, and it really had an impact on the company.
NPS works, that's for clear. But let's be honest, who answered the question as? Is the people who are very happy or who aren't very happy? And so I think that's, and I bet you do that as well, you need to look at it from a wider perspective, because if you only look at NPS and you look at the research, you're missing a big part. And I really agree with you that using NPS, and we do that as well, we have various, I think our companies in that sense are very similar, use those touch points, but it's also doing a bit more in depth, because I notice that if I look at who responds to my NPS, very happy, very unhappy. There's nothing in between. So it's using all of those inputs, I'd say.
Well, you could, even if that's true, you could say, I mean, our NPS is, in April, the average was at close to 60, right? Just to give you a reference, Amazon has 61, Audi has 38, one of the highest I know is Starbucks, they have 77, and that's kind of like unheard, right? So Google has a negative one, right? So having an NPS of close to 60 with that kind of depth that we have is pretty solid. And it was a couple of percentage points better than the previous month. And you can compare it within, right? So are we getting better? Are we getting worse? Where did we get worse?
I totally agree. It works. Yeah.
Okay, a final question for everybody. Do you think it's a good idea to adopt a business-to-consumer model? Should more startups have the courage and the inspiration to go direct to the consumers? Or should they rather work with the utilities and become a nice supplier and make the utilities happy and do B2B? What do you think? Is it a good position? What do you recommend?
Well, where's the value, right? So as a startup, we should ask the customer. Owning the customer relationship, a lot of value. That's why you should go there if you feel you can do it, right? Having a lot of data, a lot of value. Being able to upsell to that same customer while only spending marketing money once, a lot of value. So then, of course, there are plenty of other business models, but that's why there's a lot of value and will always be a lot of value in being directly at the customer and building a brand.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I mean, that's the reason why we chose that. We've seen so many businesses who do amazing solutions, and we've seen a lot of them here today. But if they're dependent on some large incumbent taking a decision, and actually giving them money, then that really hinders the process of building the company. I think there's a couple of prerequisites if you want to run a B2C business from the inception. And I think you need to have a basic understanding of all the things that has been talked about here. You need to be able to hire a team that actually has done these things before. If you do it for the first time and want to sort of learn about it, then I think it's very difficult. But if you do have within the founder team experience on how to do this, I think it's a great idea, because exactly like Philipp said, that's where the value is. I mean, in the end, and that's something I see in all this energy business, in the end, we're all dependent on people paying their power bill, right? And this money has to channel through all the way to all these amazing ideas that we see here at the moment. And all this has to be paid out of something. And I don't think people are willing to pay more all of a sudden just because some amazing things happen with the grid, right? I mean, they all want to pay the same or less in the future for the electricity. So this is why we as Shine, we decided to really be close to the customer, to be able to help them maybe pay less in the future, help them kind of do all these amazing things, and still earn a little bit of money from them in a scalable way. So just really go where the value is, and I think the value and the data is just with the customer. Well,
I couldn't agree more.
well.
Yeah, it's a mindset question. If you're in it for the long run, if you want to own the customer relationship, there's no way in going directly to consumer. If you just in for the quick shot, 2 years and then exit, maybe something else will work. But you have to know this is going to take some time. It's probably going to take some money. It's going to take the right staff with a B2C mindset, totally different than B2B. And if you can get that done and combine it with a very clear value proposition. Yeah, the world is noisy out there. There's a famous man who said that once. But getting the money from people is not hard. Getting the time from people, that's hard. Yeah? So being simple, being emotional, and having a clear value proposition, if you can get that done, then go for it.
Okay, I summarized the panel. Business to consumer rocks. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Super.
Thanks, guys.